Okay, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I'd like to discuss a few things to consider and things that I've learned over the years when it comes to the topic of hiking. So if you're new to the hiking community and culture, or you're just wondering where to even start, then this video may be helpful for you. With that said, I'd like to give you a few tips for your next hiking adventure. So tip number one is to know your environment. And when it comes to knowing the environment, there are so many different categories and things that we could dive into and things to consider. So my biggest advice with knowing your environment is to do the groundwork. You know, do your homework, research the area, find out all that you can about the area that you're planning to go and do a hike. Again, this can range from several different topics. When doing your research, is this a place that's free, or are there certain restrictions and fees that come with going to this campground or this trailhead? Do you have to pay for parking? You don't want to just show up to a place and then find out that you have to pay and not have the money required. What is the mileage? Are you planning a 20-mile hike from one outpost to the other on the Appalachian Trail? Or is this some half-mile loop that somebody's grandmother could do? And I say that loosely because I do know some old folks that could honestly run laps around me. Another thing to consider when knowing your environment is, what is the terrain like? Is the area you're hiking a very densely forested area? Is there super rocky terrain with loose boulders that you might have to climb over and do some scrambling? Or is it super sandy terrain where your feet are gonna dig in and your calves will be burning by the end of the day? Which brings me to another point. What is the difficulty of the hike? Have you researched if this is something that you are capable of doing? Everybody is gonna gauge this quite differently, and I think some of this just requires you to know yourself and know what you're capable of. The last thing you wanna do is get into this hike and realize that you are not prepared for what you just embarked on. If you're not an avid hiker or some crazy trail runner, then it might not be in your wheelhouse to go do that 10-20 mile hike in the Appalachian Trail. Maybe you do need to start on Grandma's Loop. You also want to have a game plan and know what trails you're planning on doing that day. Is the trail an out and back, or are you able to start at the trailhead and do a loop that comes back to where you started your hike? Because the last thing you want to do is end up lost because you didn't make a game plan and know the environment and figure out what trails you were going to be hiking. Another important thing to think about is what kind of wildlife and plant life is in the area. If you're like me and you're allergic to poison ivy, this is very important information. Are you going to be on a trail that's known for having lions and tigers and bears? Oh my, maybe not the tigers, but are there mountain lions in the area? Are there black bears, grizzly bears? And then last but certainly not least, check the weather, thinking that it's going to be a bright and sunny day, and all of a sudden the weather changes, there's thunderstorms and lightning, and you don't have a raincoat. Now you're getting soaked in the middle of your hike. Always make sure to check the weather before you go and plan this hike. One really helpful tool that I like to use where I can find out a lot of this helpful information is an app called Gaia. Now this video is not sponsored by Gaia in any way. I'm simply just a fan. I've been using Gaia for quite a few years. There's several different things you can learn about a geographical area, whether it is the difficulty of a hike, mileage. You can download topographical maps, which can be really helpful with things like terrain and knowing if you're going to have to do a lot of incline or decline, being able to track your hike, knowing your distance, how fast you've been going. You can even set routes. It'll basically guide you on the trail if you're on a trail that maybe you're kind of unaware of and don't really know exactly where you're going. A lot of times Gaia can show you the exact route. It can also be used without internet connection. Yeah, it's been a very helpful tool for me, and if you don't know about it, definitely go check it out because it can be a lifesaver. But all this brings me to my second point, which is pack accordingly. Now, I did a video on this a while back, basically showcasing how I would pack for a typical day hike. That list isn't necessarily exclusive or inclusive, but it's just to give you a rough idea of what things to consider. So I'm not gonna be super extensive in describing the things that I pack. If you wanna check out that video, I'll have it linked so you can check that out. But basically the things that you want to consider packing will definitely be determined by the research that you've done ahead of time and the planning that you did before getting out on your hike. Is it going to be raining and you need to have that rain jacket? Is it going to be super cold and you need a puffy? Along with other things to consider packing are snacks, because you definitely want to refuel, especially if you're doing that 20-mile hike on the AT. And of course, you always want to carry some emergency items with you, mainly some sort of med kit in case something were to happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but you always want to be prepared and have some sort of emergency kit that can help you out in a bind. And then one thing that I think is often overlooked, but I always take with me on a hike, is my wallet. All these things I've listed and explained in my packing video. So if you want to go check out the full list and explanations behind the things that I take with me on a day hike, I'll definitely have a link for it. Hopefully it can provide you with some more useful information to get you prepared on your next day hike. And then my third tip is super simple, but it's to enjoy your hike. I'm sure it's not a tip that you were necessarily expecting. Maybe there was some other useful tip I could have given, but I do think that this one is a very important tip. Why most of us get out in nature doing these hikes in God's creation is to get away from the fast-paced hustle and bustle, enjoying being away from all of the stress that comes with society at times. And so we don't always have to be in a rush to get to that destination. Sometimes we need to slow down and just embrace the hike, embrace the journey, stop and smell the roses or whatever wildflowers are in your area, and really just take the time to enjoy it. Alright, that's 3 tips to help you out on your next hike. And as a little bonus tip, remember to always tell somebody where you plan to be going and when you plan to return. Even though hiking can be a great and fun time, there are still dangers and things that can happen. So we always want to be mindful of the risks and make sure that we're using our brain a little bit. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful in any way and want to see more content like this, then go ahead and leave a like on the video and leave a comment down below with any questions or ideas that you would like me to cover in future videos. Alright, happy trails. We'll see you next time.